discuss some important ideas. So we're going to start with hearing from these two amazing sisters. Michelle Alexander, her, wrote this book that has revolutionized people's understanding of what's happening in prison. I sometimes wonder what the NAACP and the Congressional Black Caucus do with that book. And the other amazing sister that you just heard of, Angela Davis, whose contributions are legendary, who talked about mass incarceration more than a decade ago, who wrote the book about Are Prisons Obsolete, which I read parts of it in the prison one time, and they put in lockdown the brother who had sponsored my visit. That book is so profound that only now are people beginning to understand it. And Jill, you will start? Okay. All right, go ahead.
Well, since I've been allowed to speak.
Is this working?
First of all, good evening, everyone. Really wonderful to be in New York again. I think the last time I was here at St. John the Divine, we also had a call from Bonilla. So this is really a wonderful and moving experience. Now, I know we don't have very much time to respond to the questions since we have this wonderful, illustrious panel, and it's an honor to share the stage with all of you. Mass incarceration. Perhaps I'll begin by saying that many years ago, over 40 years ago, when I was in jail myself, for being involved in campaigns to free political prisoners, George Jackson, the Soledad Brothers, the members of the Black Panther Party. Many of us began to realize that it was not simply a question of political repression, but it was not simply a question of political repression directed against specific individuals, but the entire institution of the prison was an institution of repression, fueled by racism. And therefore, while we called for the freedom of political prisoners, we began to recognize that we had to challenge the institutionalization of racism and violence through the prison system. Now, as I think Asha said earlier, at that time there was something like 200,000 people in prison. And I can remember very distinctly feeling that this was such a huge mass of people. We could have talked about mass incarceration then, and there were 200,000 people behind bars. And incidentally, there are currently about 200,000 people in prison in India, which is about to be the most populous country in the world, and people are talking about mass incarceration in India. So that when we speak about 2.5 million people in the country's jails and prisons, we know we have a serious issue. Now, let me move on very quickly to say, I just want to make a couple of points here. I think the development of this phenomenon we've come to call the prison industrial complex has a great deal to do with global capitalism, has a great deal to do globalization in the 1980s. This is the period when you begin to see institutions that address issues of social services, you begin to see education deteriorating, you begin to see the whole welfare system falling apart, and And as a matter of fact, only that which is profitable begins to matter. Not people, but profits. And therefore, people who have problems of a lack of education, a lack of housing, no jobs, and so forth, begin to be treated as superfluous, as not belonging to this new globalization-inspired economy, and therefore you put them in prison, and in the process you get rid of the problems they supposedly have. You hide the problems of poverty by incarcerating people, and in the process, of course, you create another profitable enterprise. You create a profitable prison industrial complex. Now, let me just say very briefly that we know that this whole process is fueled by racism, and sure that Michelle's going to talk about the part played by racism in producing this phenomenon of mass incarceration. I also think it's important to point out that one of the fastest growing sectors of the prison complex is the immigrant detention facility.
Yeah, that's right.
Later on, but we should be aware of the fact that the U.S. has provided the model for the uses of incarceration all over the world. The prison has become a marketable commodity that is devouring the lives of people, especially in the global South, but literally all over the world. And finally, it's not only a question of considering the impact of mass incarceration on people who are in prison, but the uses of carceral technology on people in the so-called free world. And the best example one can see of that is in occupied Palestine, and the role that Israel